Here's what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried. Careers end, billions of dollars freeze in midair, and the entire machinery of power starts making excuses that nobody believes anymore. Let me show you what I mean. On February 13th, 2026, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem resigned as chairman and CEO of DP World, one of the world's largest logistics companies, handling approximately 10% of global trade. According to reporting from Bloomberg, CNBC, and Al Jazeera, his resignation came after documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice revealed years of correspondence with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein that included what Republican Representative Thomas Massie identified as an email from Epstein stating, "I love the torture video." That same week, Kathy Ruemmler announced her resignation as chief legal officer at Goldman Sachs, effective June 30th, 2026. Ruemmler, who served as White House counsel under President Obama, had maintained what she called a professional relationship with Epstein, but emails released by the DOJ told a different story. As reported by NPR, PBS, and CNN, Ruemmler called Epstein Uncle Jeffrey, wrote messages ending with XO and XOXO, and thanked him profusely for gifts, including writing "So lovely and thoughtful, thank you to Uncle Jeffrey" in 2018. On Epstein's 62nd birthday, she sent him an email saying, "Happy birthday. I hope you enjoy the day with your one true love," adding a smiley face. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were relationships that continued long after Epstein's 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. And here's the thing, these resignations didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because lawmakers, investors, and the public finally saw the receipts. According to the Wall Street Journal and CNBC, Ruemmler was one of 3 people Epstein called on July 6, 2019, after being arrested by federal authorities on child sex trafficking charges. That's not the behavior of someone with a distant professional connection. According to multiple reports, she also discussed visiting Epstein's private island, with emails suggesting Epstein tried to coordinate a private jet to pick her up. For bin Sulayem, the revelations were equally damning. As reported by Wikipedia citing House Oversight Committee documents and confirmed by multiple news sources, bin Sulayem and Epstein were in contact as early as 2007. The Miami Herald was first to report that bin Sulayem was identified as the beneficial owner in Epstein's $22.5 million purchase of Great St. James Island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Why? Because Epstein, as a registered sex offender, couldn't buy it himself. So he created a limited liability company in bin Sulayem's name to make the purchase. The financial consequences were swift. La Caisse, Canada's second-largest pension fund, which had invested more than $5 billion alongside DP World over the past decade, announced it would pause additional capital deployment with the company, according to CNBC reporting. British International Investment also paused new investments. These weren't symbolic gestures. These were billions of dollars in deals that stopped dead because proximity to Epstein finally carried a price. But while companies and foreign governments were taking action, something very different was happening in Washington. On February 11, 2026, Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the House Judiciary Committee for over 5 hours of testimony about the Department of Justice's handling of the Epstein files. Multiple news outlets, including CNN, PBS, UPI, and MSNBC, reported what happened next. When asked difficult questions about the investigation, Bondi talked about the stock market. When Democratic Representative Pramila Jayapal asked about the botched release of documents that exposed victims' names while redacting potential co-conspirators, Bondi said, and this is a direct quote reported by CNBC and UPI, "The Dow is over 50,000 right now, the S&P at almost 7,000, and the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about." This wasn't a press conference about economic policy. This was a hearing about a sex trafficking investigation. As CNN reported in their analysis, even a Democrat quickly pointed out that the stock market is not usually the purview of the Judiciary Committee. But Bondi wasn't there to answer questions. According to multiple reports from the hearing, she came prepared for combat, not conversation. When Jayapal asked 11 Epstein survivors who were seated in the hearing room to stand and raise their hands if they had not yet met with the Department of Justice, all 11 raised their hands. Jayapal then asked Bondi to turn to the survivors and apologize for the DOJ's failure to properly redact their names when the files were released to the public. According to reporting from MSNBC and PBS, Bondi refused. She kept her back to the survivors. "I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics," Bondi said, as reported by multiple outlets. The photograph of that moment, as MSNBC noted in their opinion coverage, shows Bondi looking straight ahead while a row of women raises their hands behind her. It's an image that captures something essential about this entire scandal. The choice to look away when looking would require action. But perhaps the most extraordinary exchange came when California Representative Ted Lieu asked Bondi whether there were any underage girls at parties that President Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein. According to the New Republic, Al Jazeera, CBS News, and Axios, Bondi responded, "This is so ridiculous. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime." Lieu then accused Bondi of lying under oath. "I believe you just lied under oath," he said, according to multiple reports. He pointed to documents in the Epstein files that he argued constituted evidence, including witness statements that the DOJ had never investigated. Bondi shot back, "Don't you ever accuse me of a crime." Now, let's be clear about what the documents actually show. According to Al Jazeera's reporting, Trump's name appears multiple times in the released Epstein files, but not in connection with the sexual abuse of women. Rather, the records primarily show that Trump and Epstein were acquainted and had a social relationship. Trump was listed as a passenger on Epstein's private jet at least 8 times between 1993 and the mid-1990s. But here's where the hearing revealed something crucial about the investigation itself. Republican Representative Thomas Massie, who co-sponsored the Epstein Files Transparency Act, pressed Bondi on a different issue. Why were the names of potential co-conspirators being redacted while victims' names were being exposed? As reported by UPI and PBS, Massie held up an email sent by victims' lawyers to the DOJ. It was a list of names not to release. "What did the DOJ do with this email?" Massie asked. "They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did." And then Massie asked about specific redactions. Democratic Representative Ro Khanna of California had identified 6 men whose names had been redacted from the Epstein files, despite appearing in documents where law enforcement seemed to suspect them of criminal activity. One of those names was billionaire Les Wexner. According to CNN's analysis of the hearing, Bondi noted that Wexner's name appeared elsewhere in the documents. But Massie called this a red herring, pointing out that the Justice Department had redacted his name specifically where it was linked to possible crimes. It's worth noting that Wexner has not been accused of a crime, and a representative has said he cooperated with law enforcement and was told he was neither a co-conspirator nor target in any respect. But the question Massie was raising wasn't about Wexner specifically. It was about a pattern. Powerful men's names redacted in contexts that suggest criminal activity, while survivors' names were left exposed. During the hearing, as reported by CNBC, photographs emerged showing that Bondi appeared to have a printout of Representative Jayapal's history of searches in the DOJ's database of Epstein files. The black binder in front of Bondi showed the words Jayapal Pramila search history and a list of documents whose numbers coincide with the numbering of Epstein files. This raised serious questions about why the Attorney General was tracking which members of Congress were searching for which documents in a database that was supposed to be released to the public. Now, here's what makes all of this so consequential. According to reporting from Axios, even influential podcasters like Joe Rogan have criticized the administration's handling of the investigation. "None of this is good for this administration," Rogan said on his podcast. "It looks terrible for Trump." When he was saying that none of this was real, this is all a hoax. This is not a hoax. How come all this shit is not released? And it's not just liberal critics or Democrats raising these questions. As The Hill reported, Bondi faced backlash from conservative media following her testimony. The article quoted conservative commentator Kennedy saying about Bondi's performance, "I think the yelling to me, I always find it so unpersuasive for everybody. She comes off like a shrieking Karen. When she's this emotional, it looks like she's lost a little bit of the edge, and she seems very, very unpersuasive." Even Fox News, according to the transcript provided, struggled with Bondi's approach. The conservative network's coverage questioned her combative style and her refusal to acknowledge the survivors in the room. Meanwhile, the consequences for those connected to Epstein continued to mount globally. As Fortune reported, Brad Karp stepped down as chairman of the law firm Paul Weiss on February 4th, though he remains a partner at the firm. In the United Kingdom, Morgan McSweeney resigned as chief of staff to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer over his recommendation to appoint Peter Mandelson as UK ambassador to the United States. Mandelson himself had been fired as the UK envoy in September over Epstein-related revelations, according to NBC News. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was called to testify before Congress about his connections to Epstein. Steve Tisch, co-owner of the New York Giants, is facing a review from the NFL. According to The Athletic, as cited by Fortune, their relationship stands out for how singularly focused it was on Epstein's ability to connect Tisch with young women. So we have a global reckoning happening. CEOs resigning, billion-dollar deals freezing, government officials facing scrutiny across multiple countries, law firm chairs stepping down, and in the United States, we have an attorney general who, when asked about the investigation, talks about the Dow Jones Industrial Average. When asked to apologize to survivors, she refuses and calls it theatrics. When asked about redactions that protected powerful men while exposing victims, she deflects to her predecessor. When asked about evidence in the files, she accuses the questioner of lying. This matters because it reveals something fundamental about how power protects itself. As Fortune's analysis noted, women exist at the periphery, tolerated because they organize the diaries of the busy men, they arrange food, they grace a table, they provide sex. That's a quote from Amelia Gentleman writing for The Guardian about the role of women in this elite world. The Epstein files show us a network of power that operated with impunity for decades. It connected billionaires, princes, politicians, lawyers, and businessmen across continents. It involved private islands purchased through shell companies, private jets, mansages arranged through intermediaries, and a level of access to the most powerful institutions in the world. And when that network finally faced exposure, what happened? Some people in other countries lost their jobs. Some companies paused some investments. But in the United States, the Department of Justice released files with victims' names exposed and potential co-conspirators' names redacted. The Attorney General refused to meet with survivors. No new indictments were announced. According to PBS reporting, when Republican Representative Chip Roy asked whether the Justice Department is planning to prosecute anyone else in relation to the Epstein case, Bondi said, "We have pending investigations in our office," without elaborating on the subjects of the investigations. But Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel had issued a memo in July 2025 saying that an extensive review of the files did not show enough evidence to charge any third parties in the case. So which is it? Are there pending investigations, or was there not enough evidence? The public doesn't know, the survivors don't know, and based on the hearing, neither does Congress. What we do know is this: accountability, when it comes, is selective. Some people resign, some people face investor pressure, some people get called before Congress, and some people get to talk about the stock market instead of answering questions about a sex trafficking investigation. The Epstein files aren't just about one dead financier anymore. They're about how systems of power protect themselves even after exposure. They're about who pays the price for proximity to evil and who gets to walk away. They're about the gap between what documents reveal and what institutions acknowledge. And as long as that gap exists, as long as victims' names get exposed while powerful men's names get redacted, as long as attorneys general can refuse to look at survivors sitting directly behind them, the reckoning isn't over. Because here's the thing about truth: it doesn't need to be believed to be true. It just needs to be documented, and now it is. The question is what we do with that documentation. Do we demand accountability? Do we insist on transparency? Do we require our institutions to serve justice rather than power? Or do we talk about the Dow? That choice, as they say, is ours to make.